Welcome to the Insights Unlocked podcast. I'm Nathan Isaacs, Senior Manager for Content Production at UserTesting. And joining us today as host is Jason Giles, UserTesting's Vice President of Design. Welcome, Jason.
Hello, everyone.
And our guest today is Ryan Leffel. Ryan is currently the Vice President and Head of Design at Priceline, where he is responsible for overseeing product and brand design, as well as research initiatives across web, mobile web, iOS, and Android platforms. He's a veteran design leader with stops at RGA, Yahoo, Quora, and now Priceline. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Ryan, I'm so thrilled to have you on. You've had this fascinating career. You've designed at some really cool companies and now at Priceline. So to get things started, can you just tell us a little bit about what initially drew you to the world of design and how your journey has kind of shaped your approach to creating these user-centric experiences?
Yes, absolutely. So I think I've always been somewhat creative, overly curious, and have enjoyed problem solving. I didn't know where that would take me in college, and this is in the mid to late 90s. There was a few classes in Photoshop, which was kind of new at the time. So I took some classes in Photoshop, learning a little bit about visual design. They began offering a course in Director, which was Macromedia at the time, using a programming language called Lingo. And we were learning how to put together interactive CD-ROMs, which kind of blew my mind. And at the time, I thought that was super cool, and I thought it was the future. So I thought I was getting into something cutting edge. Little did I know that lasted a minute. So coming out of college, I knew I was interested in digital, and I knew I was interested in multimedia. I took classes in HTML and PHP and JavaScript. I started to get into Flash and some ActionScript. I thought I was going to be a developer. I worked at a few companies actually writing code. Quickly realized I was really bad at writing code, but I was curious about how things are put together and why, and what is the business need, and what is the customer interested in, and what is the problem we're really trying to solve. And that kind of thinking led me to New York University. I went to ITP, the Interactive Telecommunications program. I studied design, research, and programming. Programming because I felt like it was probably important to know how to communicate with developers. I knew I was going to be moving into the design or research space, but being able to communicate with others who were in the same field I knew was important. So to take some classes in programming. My thesis advisor at ITP was the founder of RGA. So I got a little bit lucky coming out of my thesis. He kind of pulled me aside at the end and said, "I'm not going to get you a job, and I'll open the door for you." So landed my first real design job at RGA. Started there as an associate designer, spent a little over 5 years, left as a director. I was fortunate. I got to work with some incredibly smart, talented, creative people who are just, phenomenal to learn from. Another piece of RGA, I think, that, I was a little bit lucky with was I got to work on accounts at RGA that were actually doing testing, a lot of user research at the time. And now we're early 2000s. And at that time, testing was in person. You sat behind one-way glass and you ate candies and little chocolates and watch people on a screen or through the glass interact with an experience of some type. And you traveled around because if you wanted to see people in other cities and get a sense of what other demos were doing, you had to go travel to see it. So we didn't have the benefit of testing just, quickly and with the ease that we have today. So started learning a lot about research that way early on. From RGA, I went to Yahoo, which was another, I think, just really cool company, very much user focused. They had a super strong design culture. We had, testing labs, and we did a lot of workshops at Yahoo. Spent 3 years, started a business, didn't work out, which is a whole other interesting story. But I think actually was incredibly useful in terms of getting me to where I am now, and just, learning a lot about design and people and business in general. But I also spent time at other agencies and brands, and here I am today.
That's amazing. I love talking to folks that have been around the block a little bit. When I hear references to lingo and action scripting and authorware and
Yeah.
like, oh, haven't heard those terms in a long time. But that's an amazing journey. I know, you joined Priceline at kind of an auspicious time. If I'm right, it was in like the fall of 2019. Is that right?
September of 2019.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Okay. So, given that you have all this experience now navigating the challenges of trying to lead design at Priceline during a pandemic, and since, and all the changes that happened since, how do you ensure that your team could stay user focused when there was so much going on at that time, not only impacting people's lives, but really changing the business landscape?
Yeah. So I was a little bit fortunate because I think Priceline was always user focused. I think that's always been in the DNA. Coming in to Priceline, we were working with user testing. We were talking to customers, so it wasn't something that we had to start doing. We were already doing it. Now, in terms of getting through that time and keeping focus and managing through change, I think there's a few things to me that were helpful. One is every CEO update, the CEO reads out the company mission, and it's to be the best travel deal makers in the world. And it's simple and it's meaningful, and it's all about offering the best deals and making booking a trip simple, right? And that mission plays into, I think, everything we do and how we act. And I think we're always trying to align with that mission. When you believe in your company's mission and find the good in what you're doing, I think it's always easier to remain focused. So I think it's just really important to think about where you are, what you're working on, what is the mission, and how do you stay true to that mission. And I think doing so often helps you find your way or remain focused. And there was a few other things I think that I learned at Priceline, during COVID, especially early on, and looking back at it after, that I think really helped me as a leader. And there was a few things, and I've spoken about this and at conferences and whatnot, just about managing through change and the ambiguity and that type of thing. But a few things that I really learned there are: one, stay calm. I think our leadership did a really good job during that time of being calm and focused. And I think when you're calm, everyone around you is more likely to stay calm. If you panic, everyone else is going to panic. And we were really in a time where you did not want to panic. And we were also resilient. We quickly understood that people were still traveling, but it wasn't for leisure, it wasn't for vacation. It was for entirely different reasons. So we had to step back and understand what those reasons are and how do we shift our testing strategy and the way we're operating to meet the needs of what customers are looking for at that time. And even, kind of even stepping outside of process. And we had a lot of people who were even stepping outside of their day-to-day job and working to help the customer care team who were dealing with the pandemic on their own. So it's kind of all hands on deck, right? And that took a lot of resiliency and thinking about ways to be a little bit innovative or creative with process. Another thing is focusing on solutions instead of problems. When you're in a trying or uncertain time, it's really easy to step back and say, this is what I think is going to happen, because you're usually wrong. Or focus on a problem when you can actually it's actually more valuable to spend your time thinking about solutions. You know what the problem is. Don't spend time dwelling on the problem. Spend your time thinking about what the solution is to the problem. And during this time, speaking to our customers was more important than ever. Like I said, people still had to travel, right? It was for different reasons. So it was really important for us to talk to our customers just to understand what was important to them and what did they need at the time in order to feel comfortable. And what could we do to make them feel like we can give them that comfort and they can trust us as a brand.
Yeah. During that time, I mean, did you have to change your approach to how to go talk to customers, or was that you were already in a setup that allowed you to have those conversations and kind of get that feedback with, like you say, with so much changing going on at that time, like how important it would be to just really understand like where people at.
Yeah, I mean, the benefit of a user-testing.com is being able to talk to people, to be able to recruit and talk to people remote. So, and we do a lot of that. So that didn't really change. I think you definitely wanted to be more mindful about the types of things you were talking about and what you're asking about. It wasn't the right time to ask somebody questions about what they're looking for if they're planning a leisure trip or going on a vacation, because that's just not what people were doing. It's not what people were thinking about. So it was really about understanding what's happening in the world, being empathetic, and making sure the conversations that we were having with customers were very much relevant to the times that we were in.
So that prompts the next question then. So how do you balance that need for quick decision making while also adapting during these times of change with the importance of that thorough user research, the thoughtful design craft that you're intending to apply?
Yeah, so it's easy to get caught up in the idea of constant validation. I think we often know more than we give ourselves credit for. Good user research is always important, but it's not mutually exclusive with thoughtful design. And I think, a few important things to think about are, one, trusting your instinct, taking risk, stepping out of your comfort zone. If you can do those things, you'll be more innovative. I think a lot of the times you'll be able to move faster. I said it before, but be resilient. There's always more than one way to solve a problem. So try to be a little bit creative or thoughtful in your approach. It's not only about going through a time of change. I think nowadays, teams are probably, or let me rephrase that. I think it's not only about thinking about or going through a time of change. Many teams are working with fewer resources today than they have in the past. And I think having a mindset of how can I get it done is more important today than ever. And that really requires you to step back and think about what as process, and think about how you might be able to be a little bit more creative so that you can actually speed things up and get things done quicker and still maintain the quality that you need to have. And there's, one good mindset to have. Instead of thinking I can't, or this is how we do it, think about how can we? Because there are always quicker or more efficient ways to get things done. These are very simple examples, but if you're a designer, maybe you can solve a problem by talking in real time to a developer that you're working with. Maybe you could sketch something on a piece of paper instead of spending a lot of time in Figma, or instead of writing documentation for something that could be an asynchronous conversation. If you're a researcher, maybe you can record yourself on video doing a readout, right? Or spend less time putting together a set of Google slides. Right. So I think, and I mean, those are simple examples, but I think there's always ways to evaluate what you're doing and figuring out how can we be a little bit more creative and thoughtful in our approach to get work out there.
Well, and I think you've kind of touched on this a couple of times, and you've used the literal word, like this mindset, right?
Yeah.
Like it's this kind of the way of thinking around problem solving, orientation, and then we throw the word scrappy around quite a bit, like having a willingness to get creative. I think particularly on design teams where we kind of pride ourselves on being creative thinkers, it surprises me sometimes how sometimes we don't reflect on whether it's the way that we're working or some of the even, non-UI design, product design challenges, and use those same kind of skills that we know we have and we take a ton of pride in and apply it to kind of the problems that maybe the team or the individual is facing.
Yeah. I mean, one way that I always like to think about this is when you think about process and trying new things, think about it with the same type of approach as you would go into building a product. You're testing, you're listening, you're learning, you're getting feedback, you're pivoting. you're making adjustments. And you do the same thing when you're trying to solve a problem, when you're thinking about process. Step out of your comfort zone, try something new, get feedback. You're going to quickly learn if it's working. If it's working, great, keep on going and figure out how can I keep on improving. If it's not working, then pivot and try something else. That's how you build a product. But I think it's also a really good way just to think about process and innovating on process in general.
100%. I mean, I tell my team, we've been given this gift of whether you call it design thinking or whatever, like, it's a superpower that can be applied to so many, just any problems, right? And that kind of shift sometimes like really cuts through to some of the creatives on the teams.
Yeah. And if you make a mistake, it's okay. And if you fail, it's okay. And, people say it a lot, like it's okay to fail, but it really is okay to fail. And, failing is the best way to learn, and it's the best way to innovate. And the important thing is to own it and understand what went wrong and figure out how to move forward from there. Yeah. Design and research are actually, by the way, design and research, in my opinion, design and research are probably one of the safest places to fail.
Because there is that freedom or that expectation that it is an experimentation environment.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's experimentation. And nothing is set in stone. If you design something and it's not working and it's not hitting the mark that you need, you can always go back and you can make a change, right? It's not permanent. And it's the same thing in research, right? You can always go back and do more research and figure out what questions you may not have asked. And it's never too late to fix a problem or to address a solution.
Yeah, totally. We've been talking a lot about, leading teams through change. There's no shortage of it going on right now, both from a technology perspective, new technologies introducing themselves and opening up all sorts of opportunities, but also could be impacting the way that we approach our work. The economy and what we've seen within our industry, particularly. Are there any other kind of specific strategies that you've developed during big changes like this, other than what, we've kind of talked a bit about around keeping your design team motivated when these kind of external factors are at play?
Yeah. So one, be there for your team. I think that's one important thing to mention. If you can build a culture where people are comfortable speaking up and asking questions and being curious and knowing that they could come to you, I think they're going to be more comfortable in the way they're working. Let your team know you're there when they need you, but empower them to do their jobs. I think it's also really important to provide, I just talked about being there for the team, but also providing support, I think, is another good way to help with confidence. We just had our research team. They recently spent some time with the design team, just talking about research and how to conduct research and how to, validate design decisions and how to go about asking questions. It makes the design team better at testing. Mm-hmm. They become better at testing. They become more confident running tests on their own. We have a smaller research team at Priceline, so it's really important that our research team is able to help guide and coach and be there to support others, not even in design, but anywhere in the organization, and help empower people to be more comfortable engaging with customers. I think communication, I think, is just incredibly important, and I think we do a few things on the communication front. We have a monthly newsletter where the team will send around what they're working on. Researchers will get to give insight into some studies that they've run. We do it every month, so they get to run. They get to put out insight into studies they've run over the past month. It's just a really good way to give the team a stage, and it's a good way for you to let other people in the company know what you're working on and the types of things that you're learning. And it's also important not just to talk about what works, but also talk about what you tried and didn't work, right? Mm-hmm. So what did we test that didn't go well, and what was that learning that came along with it? It's just as important as talking about the successes or the positives.
Yeah, it's normalizing that kind of safe place to fail culture that you're striving to develop there.
Yeah, for sure.
That's really cool. Yeah, so many as I think about our team, I think about the importance of that kind of communication. I always actually, think about that balance between being there, being support, the calm hand at the rudder, at the same time, authenticity and vulnerability, right?
100%.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's scary. This is change for more senior folks who have been through the financial crisis and the dot-com bust and all that. Like it's nice to be able to pull from some of that and have some faith around, like we will get through this and we'll get through it together. But, you know, to ensure to be able to have that kind of trust at the same time, having your team feel like, okay, like I can follow this guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a real, it's just a fascinating leadership challenge. And, there's no shortage of change going on. So we get to do lots of practicing ourselves.
Yeah. I think change is one of those things that I think it's just important to get comfortable with. We're always going to be dealing with moments of change. And so just understanding that we're always going to be in an environment where there's a lot of change and accepting it, I think makes you better at working through it. And we're naturally even forget what's happening in the world, because I think there's always things going on in the world that create uncertainty and there's ambiguity. But even thinking about what we do, like we're solving problems, so you never fully know what's going to happen. So, I mean, just the nature of our job is really working through change in the unknown.
Yeah. One of the things, I basically cut my teeth at Microsoft, and whether it's true or not, I tell people, they reorg every 6 months. And, while that was a little bit tough growing up in the industry, what it really provided was this kind of organizational agility and almost just getting used to things just constantly changing. And what I have found is that, when you really want to do like kind of step changes, when the tectonic plates are starting to like rumble and move, that's the time where you can actually apply and think differently and actually do some real innovation. It's when things are kind of like, yeah, it's the way they are and everything's the same, that it's a real grind to kind of move things forward. So I find I try and talk about the opportunity like within that space of like, great, everybody's going to be a little disoriented during a time of change. They're looking for somebody who's got ideas or have a vision for how it could be. And so I think that kind of going back to mindset, I think that opportunity to have that kind of problem solving mindset and see it as an opportunity, not to be Pollyanna about it, but I think it's helpful in kind of reorienting teams in moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Totally agree. One way that I always like to think about it is understanding that you can always have an influence. So you can't always control an outcome, but you can always have an influence on what's going to happen. And you have to recognize the things that matter. And if it's important to you, then it matters. So we talked about dealing with the pandemic and COVID early on at Priceline. We knew our mission mattered. That didn't change because there was a pandemic. It was how we approach problem solving within that mission that was important. And it's never worth, thinking about, and going back to COVID, since we started on that, right? We were definitely in a time of uncertainty. We didn't know what was gonna happen to ourselves, to our friends, to our family. We didn't know what was going to happen within business, and we couldn't control that, but there was a lot that we were able to influence. And I did touch on it a little bit earlier, but, for us, it was, people talking to customers, we understood that people, if they did have to travel somewhere, what do I need to know that I'm going to be safe? And, we start thinking about, okay, what kind of messaging can we offer, and what can we do that will make customers trust us and know that we're selling them something which is going to be as good of experience as possible given the times that we're in. That was a moment of influence, right? So we couldn't control the outcome, but we were able to influence how people felt and how people interacted with us. And that I think is incredibly important. And I think even when you don't know what's going to happen and you're really worried about what the outcome is going to be, you need to look at that and figure out what are the moments right now that I can actually influence. It might not change what's going to happen, but at least I did everything I can to have an impact on whatever that outcome is going to be.
Yeah. So as we think about changes that are underway right now with the emergence of new technologies that are both challenging us and maybe also scaring us a little bit, how are you thinking about AI, whether it's how you work or how it's applied to your product, as we're the patterns of behaviors and the attitudes toward it is constantly changing.
So, yeah, I mean, I think in terms of design and research, we're still trying to figure out how we're working with AI. We use ChatGPT, which is kind of a baseline. I think everyone is doing that. I think the design team is starting to leverage some of the AI capabilities that come with Figma. On the research side, it's something that we're talking a lot about in terms of how and when to use AI. I think, one of the best examples I've seen is AI being used in repositories and, such as there's a company, Marvin, that I think does a great job with an AI repository and helping synthesize results and videos. And I think just uses AI in some just very smart, creative ways that help make the job of a researcher much easier in terms of getting to where they want to be and also democratize the work that they're doing. So I think that type of thing is super interesting and look forward to seeing where we're going in that space.
Does with the foundation that you've laid around this attitude of embracing change, do you find that your teams are in general excited about the opportunities that it could open up, skeptical, just downright scared of what the implications of tech like this could mean?
I think people are excited about it. I think there was a moment, and I think a lot of people still feel it, but I think there was a moment early on with AI where people thought, okay, this is eventually going to replace my job. I don't think it's true. I think if you're a designer, if you're a researcher, really, I mean, if you're a designer or a researcher, I think AI is on your side. I think it becomes another tool that you have to learn how to use. At one point, it might have just been about software or learning how to use, Figma or, going back Photoshop or whatever it might be. Now, I think it's more about what are the tools that I can use in AI that will actually help me do my job better. And I think you have to think about it as something that is going to assist you, not at all replace you.
Yeah, I think that really mirrors kind of the sentiment, both with folks in the industry that I talk to, but my own personal team. And what I do love about having critical thinkers on the team is they're like, well, like they're running it through its paces, like, well, wait a minute, is this valid? And this is, is this truth? And is it actually saving me time? And in some cases it is. And in some cases, like, I don't think we're there yet, so,
Yeah.
not, in some cases we're seeing like maybe a little bit of a disillusionment trough that folks go through. But, I find most creative teams are like, they have a healthy skepticism, but they're kind of running with it and seeing what the possibility could unlock.
Yeah, they're running with it. And there's going to be times where it works great. There's going to be times it doesn't work that well. There's going to be some times where maybe you don't want to trust it or shouldn't trust it. But it is becoming a critical piece of what we're doing. And I think it's going to continue to evolve, and we just have to embrace it.
Kind of maybe final question. I mean, just stepping back, we know that design and product isn't working in a silo. As you think about working with other departments to ensure that we still have kind of laser focus on the customer, do you have any kind of thoughts on or specific tactics that you use to gain internal buy-in on considering customer perspectives, or is it so baked into actually how the company operates that doesn't tend to be a challenge for
No,
you?
I think it's pretty baked into how the company operates, but I do think there are a few things that I've learned along the way that are quite helpful. When I worked at Yahoo, which was a very user and customer centric company and had a great design thinking process, one of the things that we used to do is we used to have every quarter and every large sprint, we would have workshops, and they would be 3 to 5 days, and it would be a cross functional team. And if you were asked to be in a workshop, you were in the workshop, and your computer was going to be closed for those days, and you knew what you were going to be focused on during that time. And it was cross functional. It would be designers, it would be PMs, it would be developers, it would be account managers. I mean, it was truly a cross functional exercise, and we would solve a problem together. Everyone would sketch, regardless of if you're a designer or not. Everyone would sketch, and we would get to a place where we were actually, sketching on large flipboards, and we would have users come in with sticky notes, and they would use a sticky note to mimic where a click was going to be. And we would get that feedback, and we would iterate. And at the end of the week, we would have some type of prototype. Now, the best thing about that was getting a cross-functional team together early on, because everyone felt like they were part of the solution. Everyone felt like they had a stake in what we're doing. And that made it so much easier to get and to maintain alignment throughout a process, because everyone felt like they were involved, which is much easier than coming up with a solution and you have really insightful user feedback, but now you have to convince others why you want to do something or why they should invest their time in getting something done. So I think the more that you can collaborate and the more that you can get cross-functional peers involved early on and push people who aren't designers out of their comfort zone to sketch or to work with you on what they find inspiring or what they're seeing in the world that they like, that they think that they could bring to the solution you're trying to achieve, is incredibly, incredibly helpful and valuable. And I think the other piece is, find senior leaders who can be allies, who you can go to and you can talk to and get them on your side, right? And show them the value. If they don't know, show them the value of what research done, or show them the value of what you could do with really good research.
Yeah. There's nothing like, we sometimes we take for granted some of the skills that we bring to the table, and we're so used to applying them in certain ways, but being able to facilitate conversations and ideate solutions and make people comfortable and all of that, applying that again to that problem of gaining buy-in or gaining alignment and support. We've got a pretty special kit of tools at our disposal.
We certainly do. I mean, I've a few jobs ago working at an agency, and we would start working with clients, and they had never done research and they haven't done user testing. They just think they know their product, which I think it's okay. And I think it's, still fairly common. I work on this every day. We speak the language. We know what our customers need. So we just move forward. Some of the most eye-opening moments I've ever seen with executives are when you come in and you play video clips of customers engaging with their site or their app, and they hear things that they've never heard before, and they see people struggling with something that they never realized they struggle with. Is really an eye-opening experience. And once you do that, people really do become believers, and then they want to start doing more of those types of things.
Yeah. Sometimes we call that the aha moment. Like, oh, now
Yeah.
I get it. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. I've had an awesome conversation with you. If folks who are listening, watching, would like to learn more about you, your insights, what you're up to, what's the best way for them to kind of dig in and learn more?
The best way for me is on LinkedIn. It's /R Leffel. So tend to post there when I'm able, but it's really the best way to find it.
Brilliant. Well, again, thank you, Ryan. I really appreciate this, and it's just been a pleasure getting to know you a little bit better. And
Yeah, thanks, Jason. It was great speaking with you.
have a great day.
You too.